Hello lovely people, Kitten here. First of all, an apology. I've been missing the past couple of weeks. I've had a huge flare up. I haven't been this rough for quite a long time. I have a new symptom coming out as well. I think this illness is going to make it unpredictable as to what and when and how I can do things. That's not who I am. I have my lists, I do my routine. I like to know where I am and know what I'm doing. I like to say, you know, Friday this is happening, that's going to... But I think this coming year you might find I get a bit skippy and patchy. All I can do is apologise. It's the fibro. As it progresses, there's not a lot that I can do to control it or get over it. I keep seeing all these courses that say, oh, cure it, get over it, heal from it. It's all a load of rubbish. You cannot. There's nothing. There's no medication help. What they give you doesn't help. They have at least stopped saying graduated exercise, which is a relief. But this is just a blanket apology that we're going to have to lighten up and loosen up and roll with it and do what comes. It's not something I like. I like to be consistent. You know, if I'm showing up, I'm showing up. But we are where we are, and that's it. There's nothing I can do about it. Today, I'm doing the Back to Basics Part 2. We're going to look at knitting needles. Different types, what they're made of, what they do. You might find the sound is a bit patchy at times because my breathing is really bad, but all the information is good there. If I've fluffed something and I've not made it clear enough, then just shoot me a message and I'll get round to it and I'll answer your questions as best I can. So, the first part was all the different types of yarns. This is looking at the knitting needles. Let me show you. Right, let's work on this table because my other table's full of rubbish. Knitting needles. You will often find these called knitting pins. A knitting pin, possibly because they are pin-shaped, they're long and straight. Bobble on the end to stop the stitches falling off. They are made of metal, steel is the most usual. You will get them in a lightweight aluminium. This is the only examples I've got of them. You find them on the fronts of magazines and in the pound shop, places like that. These are all made in China, lightweight aluminium. Nothing wrong with them, they're cheap. You will also find them in wood. I don't have a lot of examples of wood because I don't like them. That's my preference. I'm a fast knitter. The wood holds onto the stitch. They're really good if you're a beginner because the wood holds onto the stitch. There's less slippage of them. They're also good if you have muscle problems, wrist problems, arthritis, rheumatism, joint issues. That is not an old wives' tale, it is an actual fact. Switch from metal to wood. Round about 5 millimeters, it switches from wood, metal, that one's metal still, 5-6 millimeters, that's plastic, to plastic. I get a lot of people that used to come in and want, oh, I want a big size, but it's got to be metal. They're not available. That you can't. They get too heavy once you get into the bigger sizes, and they would be too expensive once you get to 2. Some brands switch at 5, but definitely 6. They are plastic, and that's it. Fun fact, the majority of knitting needles are made in one factory in India. Yeah, all the brands, all the things you see, Aero, Pony, can't think of another one. Not the American ones. There's a factory, Knit Pro, are made in America. That's different. There are the cheap Chinese ones making the aluminium ones. Everything else comes from the same factory. Yeah, sorry, burst your bubble. But that is true. These are your standard knitting needles. They come in 3 lengths, really 3 lengths, just to accommodate the different stitches. Those are the longer ones. That's the middle size, and then there's one smaller one. You can get them smaller. What have we got in the box? These are children's knitting needles. They're usually 3.5 or 4 millimeters. They are exactly the same as adults, but they are shorter, so that kids don't have to cope with the length. Also, you will find bamboo. The cheap bamboo ones come in shorter lengths, ideal for toy making. Absolutely perfect for toy making. So those are your standard ones. Also in the box we have circular needles. Circular needles, let's just go and get my ones hanging up and you can see the gubbins. They're difficult to store, circular needles, simply because of the shape they are. I keep mine on one of these, but I've only got a few. You can get specific pouches to store these in. They have little pockets. Circular knitting needle. Lovely noise. Isn't that a good noise? Sorry about that. Again, that's metal. That's 6 millimeter. That's plastic. That'll be a 9. They're pretty much of a standard length that way, and then it switches into a long plastic connector. They come in 40 millimeter long, 60 millimeter long, 80 and 100. Although there are now sock ones that are tiny. The knitting pin on them is only about that long. I haven't bothered. I don't like circular needles. I struggle. They're really good for when you're working shawls and blankets and big things. When I knit a jumper, I tend to work the front and the back or the 2 sides together so I don't have to sew them up. Really good for that. So that's an old one, doesn't have a joint on it. The ones with a joint on it, they're supposed to be more secure. You can also get them where they unscrew. So you just buy a pair of these and then you have one of each size in length. You can get them. Pony do them. They're not an exorbitant price. Knit Pro are famous for them. The last time I priced up a set of Knit Pro interchangeables, it was getting on for £100 for half sets. Knit Pro are a serious investment. As an aside, knitting needles, it doesn't matter what you pay for them. A 5 millimeter thickness is a 5 millimeter thickness. They are standard. if you want to pay the extra to get a dyed maple rainbow knitting needle, you do that. Won't give you any different results than paying a couple of quid for one. It really won't. They are all the same. It is in the skill of your knitting. Can we find, I don't think I've got, I'm digging in my box. I don't have any sets of 4. I've got a few bits and bobs left over from the shop. I don't have any 4 sets of 4. You also get sets of 4 or 5. You don't really need 5 unless you're making something big. They're about that long in all the standard sizes that you get knitting needles. You don't see many 1mm needles these days, simply because you don't get 2 and 3 ply. There's a 2 3/4. Look at the state of it, honestly, look at the state of it. The most commonly start is a 2mm, and that you'll be on 3 ply. I'll do that afterwards, I think, run through the different sizes. Between 2mm and 4mm is the actual width. If you were to cut that in half, it's the diameter. Diameter means the back of the circle. It's when between 2 and 4mm, they go up in 1/4 millimeters. 2, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 3/4, 3. You will also see 2.25, 2.5, 2.75, which technically is more correct than, you don't technically have half sizes. I haven't got any. I am limited in my choices of what I have. But sometimes you will see 3.25. 3.25 is the same as 3 1/4. It's just a slightly different way of expressing it. Once you get to 4mm, they go up in halves. You get, this is my pot, I keep them in a jar. Three 1/4, and then they go up in 4, 4 1/2, 5, 5 1/2, 6, 6 1/2, and then they go in whole sizes, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then it goes 12, 15, 20, and then it goes up in 5s. I think these bigger sizes over 10, 12 are new. It's to go with the big, thick, mega chunky yarns, but they don't go up in the small sizes when you get to that point. We'll have a little bit of a look at some of the accessories you will need. You will need a good tape measure, obviously, pretty much standard. Row counters. Row counters go on the needle like that. You work a row and then you move your row counter up 1. Get in the habit. You work your row, you move it up. You work your row, you move it up. They come in several different sizes these days because we have so much variety of knitting needles. And you can use a big one on all needles. It slips down and bumps into your work and pretty soon gets tiresome and irritating. But that's the universal that does everything. It's got a gizmo on the end that sits onto the needle, or you've got the other ones that have these little plastic stuff. They are all plastic these days. You can also get clickers where you click it. It's a round thing with dial, and you can hang it around your neck. You work a row, you click it. I stopped stocking them some years ago because they were constantly going wrong. There's nothing more frustrating than getting something to help you. The little thing doesn't work properly. You will also need stitch holders. These come in several different lengths, several different types, varieties. They're all just as good, they're fine. The thing to look out for is that they've got a nice, smooth curve to them, easy action in and out. You don't want to get the ones that have a curl at the end, like a safety pin. Some of them have safety pin fittings on the head. They look pretty, avoid them. They're not flexible enough. They damage your stitches. They're just not a good investment. If you've got this open space here, you can cram this full of stitches. That'll take a whole front of stitches. You could get 100, well, depends on the thickness of the yarn, but you can get 100 plus stitches on there, no bother. If you want little tiny ones just for holding your button band and that type of thing, you can go small like that. The other thing to hold stitches might not be something you use a lot. These are stitch holders. These are stitch markers. You can get stitch markers. I haven't got anything to show you. Well, I have, but they're buried in a drawer somewhere. You can get little tiny ones that hold 2 or 3 stitches. Again, avoid the ones that have complicated twiddly bits on them because they will catch in your stitches. These are some prettier ones. Little lobster catch. I can't do it because my hands are a bit fragile. You can use these for crochet as well. They've got a hook. It's normally a lobster clasp, but you can get them with French ear fittings, which is a wire that you open and close. That clips onto your work, or it will hold a stitch, a single stitch. It's used so you can clip it on so you know where you are and measure from to. You'll see somewhere it'll say place marker. You clip one of those on. There is another type of stitch marker, which is these. These are over the needle, and they actually go. I've got some on my errand work. I've actually got some in work, and I think it's the plastic type as well, the little ones. Yes, these are the little plastic safety bin types. You see, smooth, nothing to catch, work like that. And as you go from side to side, it stays on the needle and it marks a spot. That is actually a side seam. It's on a circular needle. That's the back. That's the other front. That marks if you've got your side seams, or particularly if you're doing top-down work where you'll be increase between markers. It marks where you're working to and from, or pattern breaks or something like that. They have no other use than that. You can't use that on crochet or anything else. It is literally just an over the needle stitch marker. These little chaps, I'll get confused. These little chaps are cable needles. Now, there is a lot of confusion about cable needles. Oh, I need the right size, it's got to be. No, you don't. You don't want your cable needle to stretch the stitch. So if you're working with 4mm needles, you wouldn't use a big thing like that. But if you were working with 6mm or 9mm needles, you can use anything. You're not working the stitch on the needle. I've been known to use another knitting needle that's knocking about. That's just a sufficient safety pin. I've been known to use a cocktail stick, whatever's hanging around, because you pick the stitches up with your point. You tuck your needle behind the work or in front of the work to get the stitches out of the way. Work to where you're going to come to work the stitches, and then you put the stitches back on the needle to work. You don't actually stitch with these. So, this set will do you for everything, pretty much everything. You only need that. You will need large blunt needles to sew up. Tapestry needles is the best to get. A big chunky tapestry needle. Try not to use a pointed needle unless you're desperate, because the point will actually split into the yarn and it will show. The rounded blunt of a needle will push the work out of the way and it won't gap, but it will show if you use a pointed needle. I think that pretty much covers your absolute basics. To start off, you will need 4mm needles, 6mm needles. If you want to do super chunky, you'll be on 9mm needles. Stitch holders are very useful. You can do all sorts of things with stitch holders. You've got to have a sewing up needle. You might not need cable needles for some little while. Tape measures a must. There are all sorts of weird and wonderful gadgets out there. Really, there are all sorts of gizmos and things. And if you come across anything and you're not sure about it, put it in the thing, put it in the list, send me a picture and I'll demystify it for you. 99% of the time, you don't need it. You really don't need it. Like I say, all the brands are pretty much for muchness. If you want to buy the Pretty Rainbow Knit Pro and spend 20 quid for a pair of knitting needles, they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. They're fine. You will get exactly the same results spending 2 or 3 quid on a pair of ponies. I like pony. They're good, solid, reliable. You don't need to spend a fortune. Start with your basics, your simple things. It's all in the stitches and the techniques of the needles. It's not in the gadgets you buy to do things. Some things you have to have. If you're going to do cable work, you need something to move the stitches out of the way. A cable needle is good and strong. You'll only need one in your lifetime. If you've got a crochet hook knocking about, I've been known to use that just to see. That's fine. You can do it with your stitch holders. You don't have to have it. I understand. I understand we're haulers and collectors and we want all the gizmos. But you don't. What I'm trying to say, you don't have to overtax yourself. You will want a pair of 4mm needles because that's what commonly is used to work double knitting. If you're looking at old patterns, rib was always worked on a slightly smaller needle to get the tension. So 3.5 or 3 3/4. Don't worry about 1/4 millimetre. Seriously, don't worry about 1/4 millimetre. And I have noticed a lot of patterns these days, they're not bothering to work the rib on a smaller size anyway. So I never bother, not these days. You'll need a 4mm for all your double knitting work. You will need a 6mm for all your chunky work. You will need a 9-10mm for your super chunky work. I don't think I've ever used a 7mm needle or an 8mm needle. there is a move away these days from all the textured and fancy yarns. They used to be very, very popular when you had to have the right needle to go with that kind of yarn and how it was made. That doesn't seem to be a thing anymore. So oh, hello. We have a little visitor come to see us. Coming to see you to say hello to the people. Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, thank you. Can we finish now? Yeah. Lady agrees. Your basic knitting, that's all you need. Don't over stress yourself with too much choice, because you get confused, you get lost in what you're doing, and then you lose heart. So that's all you need. That's your basic things that you need. I think I've covered everything. If I've missed anything, as you can tell, I'm still struggling. If I've missed anything, just drop me a comment. Oh, can you cover this? Can you look at this? What's this? What's that? But you don't need any fancy gizmos. You need a good yarn, good knitting needle, and away you go. So, happy knitting, and we'll see you. We might actually get to cast on something next time I do a technique video. You never know.